Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW, or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
This is from The National on Friday the 2nd of December from the news section. Inside Ian Blackford's Resignation, He Jumped Before He Was Pushed, by Abby Garton Crosby. On Thursday morning, the MP for Ross, Skye and Lochaber announced that he wouldn't be standing for re-election as the Westminster Group's leader at its annual general meeting, AGM, next week. Stephen Flynn, SNP MP for Aberdeen South, is hotly tipped to be next in line to take over the role. One senior SNP figure told The National that Blackford jumped before he was pushed next week at the AGM, while another SNP MP has claimed the move is bringing to an end remote-controlled decision-making in Edinburgh. Blackford has reportedly not addressed his colleagues in Westminster, but did reply to their tributes to him on social media, and has been defending against MP for Aberdeen South Stephen Flynn for several weeks, sources said. Rumours emerged 2 weeks ago that Flynn was gunning for the top Westminster job and trying to oust Blackford, but the claims were immediately quashed when Flynn denied them. The National understands that Flynn has the backing of around 30 out of the 44 SNP MPs, making him the most likely candidate to take over. One MP said it is unlikely anyone else would be interested in being the third party group leader at Westminster. If an MP comes forward to challenge Flynn for the leadership position, then the group will hold a vote at next week's AGM. If there's no challenger, then there will not be a vote and Flynn will take on the group leader role. Blackford said on Twitter hours after the announcement that he would give his full support to whoever takes over the top Westminster job. He said, "I'm looking forward to working alongside them as we stand up for Scotland's interests and our country's democratic right to choose our own future." A source has told The National that the feeling within the group towards Blackford is gratefulness. Not much is expected to change within the group if Flynn takes over as leader. One staffer added, he, Blackford, puts in a hell of a shift. The commute from Skye is hellish and I think he is a bit knackered. The disquiet within the group reportedly stems from Blackford's handling of the Patrick Grady scandal, where MPs were encouraged to support the Glasgow North East MP despite the Parliament for groping a junior staffer. An independent investigation found Grady, who is now an independent MP after losing the whip, behaved inappropriately towards a teenage member of SNP staff at a party function in 2016. He was suspended from Parliament for 2 days. Blackford was forced to apologise after a recording of him telling MPs to offer Grady as much support as possible was leaked to the press. This was written by Abby Garton Crosby. This is from The National on Friday the 2nd of December from the news section. SNP MP cut off after raising Lady Susan Hussey incident in the Commons, by Laura Webster. An SNP MP was cut off from raising the appalling treatment of a black domestic abuse campaigner at Buckingham Palace during a House of Commons session on Thursday. Brendan O'Hara, the party's Cabinet Office spokesperson, was interrupted by the Deputy Speaker as he tried to address the treatment of Sister Space founder Ngozi Fulani. Fulani spoke out on Wednesday to express her shock over her treatment by the late Queen Elizabeth's Lady-in-Waiting and Prince William's godmother, Lady Susan Hussey. According to the campaigner, Hussey repeatedly asked where she was really from. Despite the uproar over the incident, Fulani said on Thursday afternoon that she has not yet been approached by Buckingham Palace to discuss the incident. Describing how Lady Susan also touched her hair during the incident, she said, "I was stood next to two other women, black women, and she just made a beeline for me. And she took my locks and moved it out of the way so that she could see my name badge. That's a no-no. I wouldn't put my hands on someone's hair, and culturally it's not appropriate." But when O'Hara tried to address the situation in Westminster, as MPs discussed a new law allowing Princess Anne and Prince Edward to stand in for the King at royal engagements, he was quickly stopped by Deputy Speaker Nigel Evans. Speaking in the Commons, O'Hara said, "On the theme of modernisation, I suspect that many people will be asking, what is the point of us examining how we can modernise or help the monarchy modernise when certain parts of the institution seem stuck in the past?" And the treatment last week of Ngozi Fulani at Buckingham Palace was appalling, and I'm delighted that the Prince of Wales. Commons Deputy Speaker Nigel Evans cut him off and asked him to focus on that legislation, please. O'Hara continued after the intervention. "I think modernisation is absolutely vital, but the institution must help itself to modernise, and this bill is part of helping the institution to modernise. We will support that as it goes through today." Earlier in this speech, O'Hara had urged the government to come up with a more robust and enduring way to deal with the appointment of councillors of state, saying the bill provides temporary solutions to the constraint of Regency Acts, which says that councillors of state are the spouse of the monarch and the first four in line of succession. He said much had changed since the Regency Act 1937, and questioned whether more royal duties could not be carried out digitally. He said, "And if this bill is about improving procedures and ensuring good administrative practice, then we should be looking to the future and embracing that technology to find a much better solution, rather than simply looking back to 1937, to a time when the telegram was the fastest means of communication, and the ocean liner the quickest means of international travel. So, could the minister tell me, is there a barrier to stop the King signing documents by means of an electronic signature? What is there to prevent formal royal correspondence being done via email? And is there any legal impediment to the monarch appearing via a video link to join a meeting of the Privy Council? I don't see why any of that should be controversial." Earlier in the debate, Conservative former Cabinet Minister Michael Ellis had told the Commons, "Not everything can or should be done via online media platforms. The functions of the monarch sometimes do require physical presence. Often they do. Either for important legal reasons of state or for ceremonial reasons. As I say, not everything can or should be done via email. Parliament has itself set these requirements, and for good reason." The Councillors of State Bill cleared the Commons on Thursday after a series of unopposed readings by MPs and now moves a step closer to becoming law. Following Fulani's claims, a top lawyer has alleged that Lady Susan similarly questioned his heritage. Nazir Afzal said that she asked me my heritage once and seemed to accept my answer, Manchester currently, adding, "Racism is never far away though." I was at Buckingham Palace reception at which Lady Hussey, questioned the heritage of a brilliant DV expert, Ngozi Fulani. This was written by Laura Webster. This is from The National on Friday the 2nd of December from the news section. 3 Scottish towns named in list of UK's happiest places to live. This is written by Gregor Young. 3 Scottish locations are among the top 10 happiest places in Britain to live, according to annual survey. Galashiels, Perth and Stirling all made the list compiled by real estate company Rightmove. Galashiels, which came in second place and had an average asking price for a home of £153,546, was scored top across the UK for the friendliness and politeness of the people. Alice Brown, a valuer at estate agent Retty & Company Borders, said, "Steeped in history, Galashiels has a wide variety of housing, from classic period properties to new builds, offering something for every type of buyer. The countryside surrounding Galashiels also has much to offer, especially for those with an interest in rural pursuits, such as walking, trail running, biking, wild swimming, etc. In terms of entertainment, a variety of amenities are on the doorstep, including a cinema, gyms, a swimming pool, supermarkets, independent shops, cafes, a retail park, restaurants, and well-regarded schools. The recently established Heartland Market brings together the town and local businesses. Perth, where the average asking price is £179,410, came 5th, while Stirling, where the figure is £197,075, was 9th. Cornish seaside town St Ives was crowned Britain's happiest place to live overall, overtaking Hexham in Northumberland. More than 21,000 people responded to Rightmove's Happy at Home Index. Locations are ranked based on factors such as whether people feel there is a sense of belonging, the proximity to green spaces, local amenities, and whether there is a community spirit. This is written by Gregor Young.
From The National, Monday the 5th of December 2022, from the news section. Firefighters could become latest to walk out over pay complaints. By Dan Barker. Firefighters across Scotland have been urged to back the first strike over pay in 2 decades after a union blasted a below-inflation deal as insulting. Ballots asking if the Fire Brigade's union should strike will be dropping through its members' doors on Monday and follows an indicative vote earlier this year which saw the majority of firefighters reject a 5% pay rise. John Mackenzie, the union secretary in Scotland, urged his fellow members to back the walkout and said they have £4,000 in real terms eroded from their pay over the last decade. Our members are not prepared to tolerate any further erosion of their living standards, he warned. With inflation soaring to 11% and the price of food, energy and everyday items going through the roof, a 5% offer is an insult to the firefighters. Earlier this year, hundreds of firefighters took their pay campaign to Holyrood, demonstrating outside the Scottish Parliament to call for higher wages and increased staffing. If the more than 33,000 members of the union across the UK walk out, it will be the first national strike since pension action between 2013 and 2015, and the first on pay since between 2002 and 2003. Our members risk their lives every day to protect communities and businesses, Mackenzie said. The Scottish Government and employers across the UK must come up with a fair offer that fully recognises the cost of living crisis if we are to avoid strike action. And Matt Rack, General Secretary of the Fire Brigade Union, says strike action was at last resort but they were running out of options. Many firefighters and control staff are desperate. Some are struggling to afford to live. It is a dreadful and very serious state of affairs, he said. It is the responsibility of fire service employers and governments to pay their staff properly. That is part of their responsibility of running the fire and rescue service. The Scottish Government have been approached for comment. If members backstriking, with the ballot running from December the 5th to January the 23rd, they would be the latest public service in Scotland to take industrial action. Last week, teachers rejected the latest pay offer, paving the way for more strikes in schools. And national rail workers in Scotland are also set to walk out during the festive season, potentially causing chaos across the UK. Earlier this year, 78% of firefighters took part in the indicative ballot, with 79% voting to reject a below inflation offer of 5%. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, "Firefighter pay is negotiated through UK-wide collective bargaining arrangements, which includes SAFRS as the employer. The Scottish Government is not part of these arrangements. We would encourage both sides to continue negotiating to reach a fair deal for firefighters. The Scottish Government has continued the commitment to support SAFRS service delivery and modernisation with a further uplift of £9.5 million for 2022-23, bringing the budget to £352.7 million. And that report was by Dan Barker. From the National, Monday the 5th of December 2022, from the news section, Prepayment meters punishing those in poverty, by Gregor Young. People need strengthened legal protections to help stop them from being forced onto prepayment meters, ministers have been told, amid a warning they could be pushed into unpayable debt. Energy Action Scotland and the Poverty Alliance have today said they are concerned by the number of people being moved onto prepayment meters by energy suppliers, despite guidance from regulator Ofgem saying that it should be a last resort. Smart meters can be switched to prepayment remotely, but for non-smart meters, a warrant is needed to access homes to force the switch. Energy bills can be as much as 10% more via prepayment than when paid by direct debit, the organisation said. They have asked the Scottish Government to work with the judiciary and review the conditions for warrants being issued to force smart meter installations, with the Government having to act while key legislative powers on this issue sit with the UK Government. Fraser Scott, Chief Executive of Energy Action Scotland, said more could be done to set down guidance for sheriffs about what evidence the company has to show in order to get a warrant from the court. We believe sheriffs have a duty to make sure that the energy companies have done everything they can to come to an arrangement with a customer before they issue a warrant, he said. The Ofgem guidance is clear that moving customers onto prepayment meters should be a last resort. We are looking to the Scottish Government to help. Campaigners say putting people on prepayment meters punishes poorer and more vulnerable households for being on a lower income than others, and Scott said switching smart meters to prepayment ones remotely amounted to a de facto disconnection. It's obvious that these people won't be able to afford credit for the meter and will end up with no supply, he said. At this time of rising costs and increased vulnerability to disconnection, we believe that every step should be taken to protect low-income energy consumers. A Scottish Government spokesman said, "While the legislative powers relating to this matter sit with the UK Government, we are aware of incidents when energy suppliers have switched their customers' accounts to prepay mode without informing them first or obtaining a warrant beforehand. This can have serious impacts upon customers, particularly those living in vulnerable circumstances. We condemn this kind of practice. We encourage all affected customers in need of help to contact Advice Direct Scotland." And that report was by Gregor Young. From the National, Monday the 5th of December 2022, from the comment section, Drag Queen Storytime Cancellation Arguments Mirror US Christian Right, by Caitlin Logan, columnist. Last week, I wrote about the worrying trend of women's organisations in Scotland being maliciously targeted because of their support and inclusion of trans women. It's important to recognise this as a part of a wider backlash from some quarters against progress towards a world where freedom of expression and equality for all are valued in place of traditional ideals of gender, sexuality and the patriarchal family unit. Unfortunately, one doesn't have to look far for evidence of this, and another glaring example emerged just days later. On Saturday, Dundee Contemporary Arts, DCA, announced a last-minute cancellation of a drag queen storytime event for children due to hateful and intimidatory behaviour of a small number of people online, which led to the performer feeling unsafe. For the uninitiated, a drag queen story time is when a person, often but by no means always a man, dresses a drag queen, extravagant dresses, wigs and makeup, sits and reads children's books. It shares a lot of similarities to the way children are engaged in theatre through pantomimes, which typically feature a man dressed as a woman in over-the-top costume. A key difference, perhaps, being that drag has its roots in LGBTQ culture, and therein lies the problem. There are some who imply that LGBTQ people are inherently dangerous to children, and to frame any exposure of children to drag as a safeguarding risk. Many of the same people have been similarly shocked and appalled by the prospect of LGBTQ groups in schools and warn of pupils being indoctrinated by inclusive education. Their arguments are identical to those once made to justify banning schools from teaching about gay people. Today, this Trojan horse sometimes appears under the guise of protecting women, alongside the concerned parent, but rest assured that no matter how it's dressed up, the ideology underneath it is just as regressive and damaging as ever. To really understand that, we need to understand who is driving this. In this most recent incident, the groups orchestrating the pushback online were the Scottish Family Party and Us For Them, UFD, Scotland. The former is known for being vocally opposed to abortion, same-sex marriage, adoption and IVF, and what they describe as vulgar and corrupting sex education. They also warn of a domestic violence racket, suggesting that women's organisations are exaggerating the scale of domestic abuse to gain funding. UFT emerged to oppose school closures, masking and social distancing in classrooms in response to COVID-19, a campaign which saw the EIS having to report inappropriate posts from some of the group's members to the police. It is perhaps unsurprising then that the group has since branched out to complaining about selfish teacher strikes and about the corruption of young minds by seeing someone read a story in a costume. The group has celebrated having this, and a similar event in Stirling, cancelled after members sent emails to the venue, council and elected representatives. A quick perusal of the comments revealed transphobia and accusations of paedophilia, while members proudly shared a photo of a small, in-person protest where they held a sign saying, "Hey perverts, leave those kids alone." Yet UFT claims its members have been raising issues politely. Of course, it is in the interest of these groups to present themselves as reasonable, concerned citizens, but you only need to scratch the surface to see this is far from the truth. Another group which has been among the most vocal in opposition to drag performances aimed at children is For Women Scotland, FWS, who recently complained about a Glasgow drag event advertised as open to those aged 14 plus. Last month, FWS, which described itself as representing gender-critical feminists, sponsored and spoke at an event as part of the Battle of Ideas Festival alongside the Scottish Family Party, the Christian Institute and Stuart Waiton amongst others, all of whom think that smacking children is a wonderful idea, but that letting them know that LGBTQ people exist is harmful. The strange logic in that is that it all stems from a view that parents have an absolute right over their children, their bodies and their minds. And, for some, this clearly extends to the view that men should have an absolute right over their wives, their bodies and their minds. None of this is very feminist, nor does it have anything to do with children's rights, but the biggest con of recent years is that large parts of the media are willing to entertain the idea that it does. In fact, the arguments are made by these groups are the mirror image of those being made by the Christian right in the US, where a queer club was targeted just last month by a shooter the night before it was due to host a drag event for children. No clever branding or justification is going to change the fact that these people are campaigning to strip back LGBT people's hard-won rights, nor can it obscure that women are put at risk by these very same ideologies. At least the Scottish Family Party are willing to say the quiet part out loud. In a post about the Dundee event, the group said that the last thing children need is presented with the message that changing and bending gender is great fun. They got one part right. Drag is about subverting gender norms and stereotypes. And this is the crux of the matter. It's not really queer people that are afraid of, it's the ideas we represent. It's the systems that our existence threatens to crumble. Narrow ideas of femininity and masculinity, of how men and women are supposed to act, dress, be, are still pervasive in our society. This limits all of our lives in different ways, and it has been the driving force behind misogyny, homophobia and transphobia. That's exactly why feminists in Scotland and many parts of the world are working so closely with LGBTQ activists, These oppressions are rooted in the very same belief systems. Right-wing, reactionary voices are terrified of seeing these systems uprooted, and they are banking on being able to divide us so that they never will be. And that was a comment piece by Caitlin Logan. From The National, Monday the 5th of December 2022, from the comment section: Scotland's business-friendly push could set fire to net zero targets. By George Caravan. This week sees the first meeting of the Scottish Government's new First Minister's Investment Panel. This is billed as an expert group of professional asset managers and fund investors who will advise the SNP Government on how Scotland can create the right conditions to attract global capital investment to develop the physical infrastructure required for a just transition. Helpfully, the ScotGov press handout defines the necessary infrastructure as offshore wind, hydrogen, and the decarbonisation of transport. Alongside the First Minister, the new panel will be co-chaired by Angus McPherson, Chief Executive of Noble & Company. The company was founded by the late Sir Ian Noble, an SNP funder and stalwart advocate of the Gaelic language. These days, the firm specialises in providing big companies with creative advice, their phrase, on mergers, acquisitions, fundraising and restructuring. The company is especially involved with the whisky industry. One could not get closer to corporate Scotland or, indeed, global finance. McPherson himself previously ran the operations of Asia in Merrill, the famous US investment and wealth management group, where he helped privatise the Indonesian telecoms industry. Key players at Noble & Co. include former high flyers at Goldman Sachs, KPMG and Blue Crest, the big hedge fund. Between them, they have an extensive clutch of non-executive directorships and board positions across Scottish and UK business. Other members of the new investment panel include Andrew Telfer, a joint senior partner at Baillie Gifford, the Edinburgh-based investment fund that was an early and big investor in US tech stocks. Of course, the latter have absolutely dived this year. Then there is Alexandra Borisov, who fronted BNP Paribas' Green Advisory arm but recently quit to join Bank of America, BOA. In July, US regulators fined BOA $225 million for deception in its debit card accounts. BOA now wants to present a new green face to the world, hence the hiring of Basirov. Next is Gavin Templeton, formerly BP, yes the oil company, Morgan Stanley, US investment house, Rabobank, fined $1 billion for unscrupulous trading practices, and VBT, a Russian investment bank now sanctioned. Then there is Shane Christopherson, who was at RBS back in the old days of Fred the Shred, then with the Edinburgh travel website service, Skyscanner. Unaccountably, Christopherson's LinkedIn page fails to mention that Skyscanner was sold to the Chinese in 2016, crushing hopes of creating a Scottish high-tech player. Finally, there is Baroness Margaret Ford, who has sat on the board of many companies, including Serco, and is currently with Deloitte, the audit group, which has been repeatedly fined for poor auditing practices. Let's remember that incompetence, greed and excess risk-taking by banks took the world to the brink of economic collapse in 2008. And only this year, British pension funds came close to insolvency when interest rates rose sharply because they had indulged in highly questionable operations involving derivatives. However, these near-death experiences raise the obvious question: if you want to encourage green investment in Scotland, and you are serious about achieving a net zero target, then is it sensible to rely only on advice of folk from an industry with such a record of getting it absolutely wrong? Would it not be better to at least leaven the panel of experts with folk who know something about, say, renewables engineering, or, God forbid, trade unionists from the sector who know how things run on the ground? And what about people from the companies that actually manufacture the necessary infrastructure? Or even academics who might have a view on what technology might work? Of course, it is easy to see what the FM wants to achieve. She wants to position the Scottish Government as business friendly, especially if there's going to be another independence referendum soon, especially a de facto one hitched to a UK general election. And what better way to appoint groups of friendly, or not so friendly, business folk and financiers to blue ribbon panels where they get to look civic minded and bask in media attention, all without risking a dime. For financiers, and bankers especially, It is a chance to improve the appalling public image of their industry. The First Minister has a track record here. She has already appointed numerous advisory panels from the business community. For instance, she appointed ex-Tesco bank boss Benny Higgins to chair an advisory group on post-COVID economic recovery. Last year, the First Minister created a new advisory group to come up with blue-sky thinking in the future of the economy. This group included Sir Nick Macpherson, the former Treasury boss who managed to fight inside Whitehall against a yes vote in 2014, and now sits on the boards of a clutch of financial firms. You can call this a brave and inclusive tactic that shows the Scottish Government under Nicola Sturgeon is open to dialogue with businesses, and there is much to be gained from keeping your enemies closer than your friends, even if that includes Nick Macpherson. But there are also costs to such a manoeuvre. First, it risks capture by vested interests of the Scottish Government's political agenda. To prevent this, it is necessary to ensure that such panels always have a wide range of representation, including trade unions and local authorities. Second, there is a perception that the First Minister is happy to appoint such expert groups as a form of political window dressing. I doubt Nicola Sturgeon is as cynical as that, but, for instance, many of the proposals from the Higgins Committee were instantly binned. These included one recommending more Scottish Government shareholdings in strategic sectors, particularly in green industries. I have a specific worry about the composition of the new Green Investment Panel. The FM's covering statement specifically says that the panel's job is to help make Scotland attractive to foreign investors. Foreign investment is always useful both in cash terms and importing new technology, but not at the cost of handing over the national economy to foreign control. And that is exactly what is happening to Scotland. Huge swathes of the economy are now foreign owned, including whisky and food production, retailing, banking and energy. This has occurred in the space of the last 2 decades. Much of this shift has been welcomed, indeed promoted by the SNP government. Again, I can see the game plan. Without independence, ScotGov is deeply constrained at what it can do to promote internal capital investment, but it does have the ability to persuade foreign capital to come here. However, we are gently ceding more control to outside interests. Expect a new investment panel, whose members are weighted towards Asian investors, to reinforce that dynamic. The alternative lies in having economic sovereignty. An independent Scottish state can use that economic sovereignty to prioritise domestic investment in the sectors we want, not sectors chosen by international finance. We can set tax and interest rates at levels that encourage a shift in consumption towards investment, raising productivity. We don't need more dubious advice from investment bankers, we need independence. And that comment piece was by George Caravan. From the National, Monday the 5th of December 2022, from the Culture section. Newly restored Italian Renaissance painting goes on display in Fife. Report by Gregor Young. Conservation work has revealed new secrets about a 16th century painting that has gone on display for the first time since undergoing restoration. The Italian Renaissance painting of the Madonna and Child, painted in Florence in the 1520s, has been unveiled at the Kirkcaldy Galleries in Fife, where it has never been exhibited before. During the restoration work, infrared photography revealed for the first time a shadowy image, believed to be Joseph, beneath layers of paint. Meanwhile, research, which involved the Universities of Aberdeen and Glasgow, inspired gallery staff to investigate the story of how the picture has made its way from Florence to Fife. Until now, little was known about the history of the painting, which depicts Mary holding the baby Jesus on her knee with the young St John the Baptist standing by their side. A strip of paper in the back of the frame credits Andrea de Sarto, 1486 to 1530, a high Renaissance master from Florence. However, experts who have studied the painting in recent years suggest otherwise, and instead credit the studio of acclaimed Florentine artist Domenico Poligio, 1492 to 1527, who found success focusing on Madonna paintings. Interest in the painting was revived in 2016 by Professor John Gash, a senior lecturer in the history of art at the University of Aberdeen, who first linked the painting to Poligio. On Fife Collections curator Kirk Cook said, "The restoration has been a doubly satisfying process. Not only do we have a beautifully restored painting for visitors to enjoy, but a host of new insights into its story. Paint samples taken by scientists at the University of Glasgow helped to date the work to the 1520s. The restoration has been supported by Fife Council's Common Good Funds and the Woodmansterne Art Conservation Awards. The work was completed by Egan, Matthews and Rose of Dundee. During the restoration work, conservatives used infrared photography to see beneath the paint and detected charcoal strokes that reveal how the artist worked out and even changed the picture's composition. Beneath the landscape scene in the top left corner of the painting, they identified a figure, thought most likely to be Joseph, who often appears in similar positions in Renaissance paintings. The conservation work also included cleaning and strengthening the wood panel on which the artwork is painted, retouching paintwork and varnishing the painting again. Madonna and Child with the Infant St John the Baptist is the oldest painting in the extensive art collection managed by cultural charity On Fife, which runs Kirkcaldy Galleries. New research suggests it was brought to Fife in the 1860s by retired Royal Navy surgeon Alexander Woodcock, who had set up a private museum of artefacts and curiosities in Anstruther. Dr. Woodcock made regular trips to Edinburgh by steamer to meet sailors and artists, and it is thought most likely that the painting was purchased on one of these visits. The museum closed after Dr. Woodcock's death, and the painting was acquired by the local borough council, which displayed it in Anstruther Town Hall. The painting later became part of the collection of Fife Council, now managed by On Fife. An entire room has been set aside in Kirkcaldy Galleries for 1 year to tell the story of the conservation work and the recent research into the painting's past. And that culture piece was by Gregor Young.
From the National, Tuesday the 6th of December 2022, from the news section. Animal welfare charities call for boycott of reindeer events, by Gregor Young. Animal welfare charities are urging people to boycott Christmas celebrations that feature live reindeer. One Kind, Animal Aid, Born Free and Freedom for Animals say they are concerned for the welfare of the reindeer, semi-wild animals that belong roaming the Arctic tundra. The charities and their supporters have reached out to 58 organisers of live reindeer displays in Scotland, highlighting the welfare issues associated with these displays, but say the majority of the venues have ignored them. Reindeer are native to the Arctic tundra, where they often roam for thousands of miles. According to the charities, some populations travel up to 3,000 miles a year, the longest documented movement of any terrestrial mammal. They are adapted to the quiet of the wilderness, the open space and cool temperatures. Eve Massey-Bishop, a campaigner for the charity One Kind, said, "It is much more valuable to educate the public about the fascinating, varied and complex lives of animals in the wild than to promote a voyeuristic experience in which public see confined animals who may be suffering." Reindeers are semi-wild animals that do not belong in captivity. We would urge people not to visit any event with live animals used for entertainment and celebrate the festivities at one of the many animal-friendly events instead. Reindeer are sentient beings with complex needs, not Christmas props to be used for our entertainment. Christmas is a time of kindness, generosity and joy. Let's extend this sentiment to non-human animals too. Chris Lewis, Captivity Research Officer at the Born Free Foundation, added, "After decades of sustained pressure, the use of wild animals in travelling circuses was banned in England, Scotland and Wales and left in the past, where it belongs. Yet year after year, the same commercial exploitation of wild animals occurs across the nation, including the weeks before Christmas, to the detriment of hundreds of reindeer." This article was by Gregor Young. From the National, Tuesday the 6th of December 2022, from the news section. New inquiry launched into decision-making by Scottish Government, by Steph Braun. A new inquiry into effective decision-making by the Scottish Government has been launched by a Holyrood committee. The Finance and Public Administration Committee will consider the overall processes and key skills that are used by the Scottish Civil Service and others within the Scottish Government administration to make decisions. The committee's inquiry will examine what constitutes effective decision-making and how this is supported within and across the Scottish Government. Convener Kenneth Gibson said, Public administration is a key part of our committee's remit and is best described as how the functions and systems of the Scottish Government work. Our committee has agreed to undertake an inquiry to better understand the current policy decision-making processes used by the Scottish Government. It will be the first time a Holyrood committee has looked at the inner workings of the government in this way. We'll seek to identify the skills and key principles necessary to support an effective government decision-making process. The committee's main focus will apparently be on decision-making within the core Scottish Government, its directorates, ministers and special advisers. It will not be considering specific decisions by the Scottish Government or individual cases, nor will it specifically be considering matters currently the subject of scrutiny by other parliamentary committees. The committee will be looking to hear from academics, trade unions, former ministers and civil servants and public bodies to inform its inquiry. 10 questions have been set out on the inquiry webpage to inform written submissions, with a deadline for responses of the 7th of February 2023. That article was by Steph Braun. From the National, Tuesday the 6th of December 2022, from the news section. Nicola Sturgeon sends message to Blackford as he prepares to stand down, by Adam Robertson. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has sent a message of thanks to Ian Blackford as he prepares to step down as the SNP's Westminster leader. The party's MPs are set to choose either Alison Thewlis or Stephen Flynn as Blackford's successor on Tuesday evening. In a post on Twitter, Blackford said, "Today is my last day in office for at the SNP as Westminster leader. Thank you to colleagues for the opportunity to serve both MPs and staff, as well as those who have supported and encouraged me. Good luck to my successor as I look forward to my next challenges." Sturgeon replied, "Thank you at Ian Blackford MP." The Prime Minister was among many to thank the MP for Ross, Skye and Lochaber for his time in the role. MSP Neil Gray said, "Thanks Ian, as a friend and colleague you have been incredible. You will be missed from leadership, but thankfully your talent is not lost to our movement, and I look forward to working with you on this too." Blackford will be taking a new role leading on business management in the campaign for independence. Former Glasgow City Councillor Mari Hunter thanked Blackford for putting in a hell of a shift. MP for Dundee West Chris Law said, "I'm going to miss at Ian Blackford MP's graft, his guile and his gallousness. Most of all, as a Hearts fan, I'm going to miss sitting next to him, winding him up as a Hibs supporter in order to get his blood up to fight and be riled to fight the Tories at PMQs." Elsewhere, Tom French, the SNP's Director of Communications at Westminster, said, "Ian has been an excellent Westminster leader for at the NSP and the best boss you could ask for. He's incredibly hard-working, loyal, kind and always looks out for staff. His personal poll ratings and the reception he gets underline the impact he's made in Scotland. He'll be missed." This article was by Adam Robertson. From the National, Tuesday the 6th of December 2022, from the news section. Only those paying a real living wage in Scotland to receive grants, by Adam Robertson. Grants will only be given to organisations in Scotland who pay the real living wage from next July under new requirements. The condition applies to organisations receiving public sector grants from the Scottish Government, enterprise agencies and public bodies. Exceptions will be made in the case of emergency funding and where an organisation is heavily dependent on grant funding and paying the real living wage would threaten its survival. It means employees in Scotland would receive £10.90 per hour following the increase announcement in September. The requirement will be introduced from July 2023, with a conditionality introduced for eligible agricultural grants from October 2024 following ministerial consultation. Speaking as he visited Mealgai, an Edinburgh industrial biotechnology company that receives funding and pays the real living wage, Employment and Fair Work Minister Richard Lochhead said the scheme aims to improve staff retention. He said, "The Scottish Government is committed to using public sector investment to drive up wages, tackle inequalities and give employees an effective voice. This policy is a significant step in strengthening our fair work agenda. For example, in 21-22, Scottish Enterprise issued £135 million in grants to 953 businesses. Fair work and fair play are good for business. They help improve staff retention and productivity, reduce recruitment costs, and contribute to a skilled and motivated workforce." Lochhead said some 91% of employees over the age of 18 earned the real living wage in 2022, a record number, with 29,000 accredited employers. Circular Economy Minister Lorna Slater said, "An effective voice for workers is vital to ensure better terms and conditions, worker well-being and developing progressive and fairer workplaces. The ability to speak individually or collectively and to be listened to is essential to improving workers' experience, as well as improving organisational performance. We will work with employers, workers and trade unions to continue improving the terms and conditions for employees of organisations applying for a public sector grant." This article was by Adam Robertson.
The National News on Wednesday the 7th of December. Guidance issued to Scottish schools as Streptococcus A infections rise. An article written by Steph Braun. Health services across Scotland have been put on alert and guidance has been issued to nurseries and schools as the country braces for an increase in Strep A cases. 9 children in the UK have died from the bacterial infection, also known as scarlet fever, since September. Although there haven't been any deaths from the condition in Scotland, parents are becoming increasingly concerned with reports of infections rising right across the country. In response to a topical question from Tory MSP Sandesh Gulhane, Health Secretary Humza Yousaf said the Scottish Government was not complacent and steps were being taken to ensure schools and health services are well prepared for outbreaks. He told the Scottish Parliament on Tuesday a number of children in England and Wales have sadly died from invasive Group A strep infections since September. My deepest condolences go out to their families. Reports of Group A strep infections have increased right across Scotland. There are no reports of any deaths in Scotland related to strep conditions, but I understand the reporting of strep conditions will be concerning. And let me offer some reassurance. The vast majority of infections present themselves as mild illness that's easily treated by penicillin or other antibiotics. Current numbers do not significantly exceed previous spikes, but that having been said, we're not complacent. Health services across Scotland are on alert. Guidance has been prepared for nurseries and schools, especially on maintaining good hygiene and managing outbreaks. Everyone should self-isolate until they've completed 24 hours of antibiotics. Dr Gulhane raised that in the House of Lords this week. The option of using antibiotics in school as a preventative measure was talked about if cases were present in the school. Asked if the Scottish Government was considering this, Mr Yousaf said, "I've asked Public Health Scotland and my clinical colleagues to give advice to that effect. We do expect cases to rise over the coming weeks." Questioned by Labour Deputy Leader Jackie Baillie about how children can be seen quickly as new figures show A&E waiting times at their worst on record, Mr Yousaf said the appropriate guidance was being given across the health service, but stressed that GPs should be the primary point of contact for potential infections. He also said there'd been a marked and significant increase in calls to the NHS 24 helpline over the weekend relating to children under the age of 14. An article written by Steph Braun. The National Politics on Wednesday the 7th of December. Labour had to give up Scotland, according to Sir John Curtis. An exclusive article written by Xander Elliotts. Keir Starmer's Labour Party had to give up hopes of winning seats in Scotland to pursue pro-Brexit votes in the north of England. even if they'll never admit it, the UK's leading pollster has said. Speaking to The National, Professor Sir John Curtis further questioned whether the strategy of pandering to Leave voters in England was even necessary, given Labour's massive lead in the UK-wide polls. Asked why the Labour Party seemed unwilling to address the negative economic consequences of Brexit, Professor Curtis said the Labour Party decided some time ago that it wasn't in their interest to pursue the issue. Keir Starmer is calculating, or at least he has calculated, that he needs to accept Brexit in order to try to win back the Red Wall vote, although actually you do need to bear in mind that the majority of Labour voters in Red Wall seats are Remainers. Even so, it's a substantial minority who are Leavers, and Labour did lose Leavers in 2019. All of that is true. So Labour thinks they need to get those people back, and therefore they would keep stum about Brexit. Of course, that always meant they made a choice. They made a choice about which Red Wall to try to regain. Was it the North of England Red Wall or the Scotland Red Wall? In going for the North of England Red Wall, they basically had to give up on the Scotland Red Wall, although of course they will never admit it. Professor Curtis noted that Labour under Keir Starmer had seen relative success in attracting Leave voters in England, but noted that Remain voters are still a majority of their supporters. In contrast, the University of Strathclyde professor said that the SNP was picking up the largest chunk of the Remain vote in Scotland. That's the trade-off the Labour Party has made, Professor Curtis added. They won't acknowledge they've made it, but that is the trade-off they've effectively made. An exclusive article written by Xander Elliotts. The National Politics on Wednesday the 7th of December. Michelle Mone to take immediate leave from the Lords. An article written by Abby Garton-Crosby. Baroness Michelle Mone is to take a leave of absence from the House of Lords with immediate effect. Baroness Mone has been at the centre of a controversy over her alleged links to a firm awarded a PPE contract by the UK government during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Glasgow-born Baroness is understood to have made £29 million after she recommended the firm PPE MedPro to Tory ministers. It comes as Labour was preparing to force the UK government to release records relating to the award of the contract to PPE MedPro. A spokesperson for Baroness Mone said, with immediate effect, Baroness Mone will be taking a leave of absence from the House of Lords in order to clear her name of the allegations that have been unjustly levelled against her. The leave of absence means Baroness Mone, founder of lingerie brand Ultimo, will not attend sittings in the House, vote on any proceedings, and will not be able to claim any allowance. Baroness Mone has previously been criticised for her low attendance in the Lords, with a Sunday national investigation discovering she only attended on 4 days over a 6-month period. It comes as Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner has accused members of the Tory party of using the pandemic as an opportunity to get rich, as she called for the release of PPE contracts awarded to a company linked to a Conservative peer. The Labour Party will try to force the government to release records of a £200 million contract awarded to PPE MedPro, which Baroness Mone may have profited from, according to reports. Baroness Mone has previously denied having any relation to the company. The government has also come under fire for the use of VIP lanes, whereby preferential treatment for public contracts can be given to organisations recommended by MPs and peers. Brendan O'Hara MP, the SNP's Cabinet Office spokesperson, said, "The reality is that Baroness Mone should have had the whip removed from her a long time ago, while a thorough investigation into her business dealings was carried out. Instead, the Tories have turned a blind eye while presiding over an anything-goes culture that has seen vast sums of money given to friends, family and party donors. The exact circumstances surrounding Baroness Mone's case are now the subject of a National Crime Agency investigation, which must be allowed to proceed without hindrance. But it's clearly for her to answer exactly how much money she and her family have made from these contracts, in what circumstances, and what tax arrangements were made. But the bottom line in this whole affair is that the stench of sleaze surrounding this broken Tory government has become simply unbearable." Yesterday morning, Ms Rayner said on the Today programme that companies like PPE MedPro were recommended during the pandemic by Tory ministers, MPs and peers, and given fast track and preferential treatment. She described the so-called VIP lane as a scandal of epic proportions. Ms Rayner said that the company was awarded a £122 million contract for gowns that could not be used, and that £700,000 of taxpayers' money a day is now being wasted on storing the unusable PPE. The company has denied that the kit was faulty. She added, "This looks very dodgy, people making huge sums of money on PPE that couldn't be used. It needs to be exposed now. Those documents need to come out, and it needs to be out in the open." The motion, tabled by Labour in the Commons, would compel the release of all papers, advice and correspondence involving ministers and special advisers, including submissions and electronic communications relating to the PPE MedPro contracts, to the Public Accounts Committee. Speaking after Baroness Mone announced her leave of absence, Ms Rayner said the Tories were out of excuses. The Labour Deputy Leader added, "They can't keep taking the public for fools by refusing to come clean on what they knew about this dodgy deal." Rishi Sunak was too weak to remove the whip and has left it to Baroness Mone to finally read the writing on the wall. An article written by Abby Garton-Crosby. The National Politics on Wednesday the 7th of December. Scottish independence support at 56%, Ipsos Mori poll finds. An article written by Laura Webster. Support for Scotland leaving the Union has risen to a whopping 56%, according to the latest polling from Ipsos Mori. The survey, commissioned by STV News as part of the Scottish Political Monitor project, put yes support up 6 points since its last poll was carried out in May. Over the last 18 months, yes and no have generally sat neck and neck in the polls. The first poll, carried out after the Supreme Court result, which said Scotland requires Westminster's consent to hold IndyRef 2, found 52% support for independence with Don't Knows removed. Now, with Don't Knows removed, Ipsos has recorded 56% for yes and 44% for no. If such a result were replicated in a referendum, it would mark a reversal of the 2014 vote. As well as increased support for leaving the Union, the pollster found that the SNP would win a record 58 seats in the next general election, which the party hopes to use as a de facto referendum on independence. When respondents were asked how they would vote in a de facto referendum, 53% said they'd back the SNP. A further 2% would vote Green, taking the pro-independence vote share to 55%. In such an election, Scottish Labour would win a single seat, while the Lib Dems and the Tories would be completely wiped out north of the border. SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown said the poll shows momentum for yes is rocketing. For too long, Tories and Labour have claimed now is not the time for the people of Scotland to choose their own future, he said. This poll shows clearly the people think now is the time. The Westminster parties need to recognise and respect that. He went on, no Westminster politician can stand in the way of the Scottish people. To escape the damage of Brexit that both Labour and the Tories back, and to protect Scotland from Westminster governments Scotland doesn't vote for, we need to choose an independent future. Elsewhere in the poll, Nicola Sturgeon remains the most popular party leader, with more than half of Scots having a favourable view of her. Scottish Labour leader Anna Sawa and Scottish Greens co-leaders Patrick Harvie and Lorna Slater also have positive net favourability ratings at +3, +1 and +2 respectively. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has a net rating of -21 and Keir Starmer is at -13. Douglas Ross is by far the most disliked politician among Scots, with a net rating of -38. Despite increased support for leaving the UK, the results show the public remain divided on the timing of IndyRef 2. The First Minister had aimed to hold one in 2023, but this had been made very unlikely by the Supreme Court's recent judgment. Just over a third want to see IndyRef 2 before the end of 2023, while 34% back holding it between 2024 and 2026. Around 17% say it should take place further in the future. There's also been a 5-point decrease in the number of people saying there should never be another referendum. Emily Gray, the managing director of Ipsos in Scotland, said, "These new results from Ipsos and STV News show an increase in both support for independence and support for the SNP. Whether this is a temporary bounce in the wake of the recent Supreme Court judgment or a longer-lasting trend remains to be seen." Ms Gray said the de facto referendum is a high-risk strategy. However, she added, the indication from this poll is, at this stage at least, this is not harming their electoral chances. More than 1,040 adults were polled between November the 28th and December the 5th. An article written by Laura Webster. The National Politics on Wednesday the 7th of December. Stephen Flynn elected as new SNP leader at Westminster. An article written by Abby Garton-Crosby. Stephen Flynn has been elected the new leader of the SNP's Westminster group. It has been confirmed. The Aberdeen South MP stood against Glasgow Central MP Alison Thewlis in a head-to-head for the leadership position and won. Mary Black, MP for Paisley and Renfrewshire West, will serve as Mr Flynn's deputy. Mr Flynn won the backing of 26 MPs, while Ms Thewlis picked up 17 votes, with one MP not voting in the contest. It comes after Ross Skye and Lochaber MP Ian Blackford resigned from the role after 5.5 years. Mr Flynn was elected by a majority of SNP MPs at the group's annual general meeting last night. Speaking after he was confirmed as the SNP's new Westminster leader, Mr Flynn said it was an honour and complimented the talented team of MPs. He continued, "Under my leadership, SNP MPs will be relentlessly focused on standing up for Scotland's interests and for our democratic right to decide our future in an independence referendum." Families across Scotland are paying a devastating price under Westminster control, with Brexit, austerity cuts and the Tory cost of living crisis hammering household budgets. SNP MPs will work harder than ever to hold the Tory government to account and make the case that independence is the essential route to safety, fairness and prosperity for Scotland. I'd like to thank Alison Thewlis and Stuart MacDonald, who are both hugely talented MPs and will continue to play a key role in our movement. I'd also like to pay tribute to Ian Blackford MP and Kirsten Oswald MP, who have been a fantastic leadership team and will be welcome sources of advice as we move forward together. Ms Black added that she was delighted to take on the deputy role and stand up for Scotland and make the case for independence. She said, "Westminster is failing Scotland, with the Tories and Labour Party both wedded to Brexit, austerity cuts and democracy denial. It's clearer than ever that independence is the only way to escape the damage of Westminster control and get Scotland back on the path to prosperity." Other MPs were quick to offer their congratulations to Mr Flynn and Ms Black. Mr Flynn's predecessor, Ian Blackford, wrote, "Congratulations to Stephen Flynn on being elected the SNP Westminster leader. I look forward to supporting Stephen as he takes on the responsibility of taking the group forward as we work to deliver independence." Ms Thewlis added, "Congratulations to Stephen Flynn and Mary Black, and my thanks to all who have been so lovely and supportive, especially my running mate Stuart MacDonald." Hannah Bardell said, "A really positive and uplifting case put forward by all. We have so much talent in our group and our party. Look forward to working with them all in their various roles." An article written by Abby Garton-Crosby. The National News on Wednesday the 7th of December. Temperatures to fall amid snow and ice warning. An article written by Gregor Young. People in Scotland have been warned to expect snow and ice later this week as Arctic air sweeps in, with temperatures likely to drop below zero. Overnight temperatures could plunge below -10 degrees Celsius over higher ground and could hover not far above zero during the daytime. The Met Office has issued yellow weather warnings of snow and ice for northern Scotland over the course of today and tomorrow. It warns that 2 to 5 centimetres of snow is possible at lower levels, with 5 to 10 centimetres above 200 metres, and said that drifting and blizzard conditions are likely in the strong northerly winds. Met Office spokesperson Ollie Claydon said, "We could see temperatures of minus 10 degrees Celsius and even lower in parts of Scotland, especially over higher ground where there is lying snow which can drive temperatures down. Even daytime temperatures will be struggling to stay above freezing in some places towards the end of the week." He added, "The airflow is coming from a northern direction and is bringing an Arctic maritime air mass which is bringing these cold conditions." Temperatures last dropped below minus 10 degrees in Scotland in December 2020, when they fell to minus 10.2 degrees Celsius in Dalwhinnie in the Highlands, while in December 2017 a temperature of minus 13 degrees Celsius was recorded in the same place. The coldest December night on record was on December the 30th, 1995, when the temperature fell to minus 27.2 degrees Celsius at Altnahara, also in the Highlands. Scotland's cities are likely to experience low temperatures by the end of the week, with Aberdeen, Glasgow and Edinburgh shivering at around 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. The weather warning covers Angus, Perth and Kinross, Aberdeen, Aberdeenshire, Moray, the Highlands, Western Isles, Orkney and Shetland, and Argyll and Bute. With temperatures falling, Age Scotland urged the public to check in on elderly neighbours, friends and relatives. The charity warned that icy weather conditions can be especially dangerous for older people, and with energy bills rising, there are also concerns some older people may be reluctant to turn up the heating. Age Scotland's Adam Stracura said, "Our helpline has already been hearing from an increasing number of older people struggling to heat their homes." An article written by Gregor Young.
This is from the National on Thursday the 8th of December 2022. This is from the news section. FMQs. Douglas Ross accuses Nicola Sturgeon of disrespecting PO. This article is by Xander Eliards. Douglas Ross accused Nicola Sturgeon of disrespecting the presiding officer in a texture class at First Minister's Questions. The Scottish Tory leader had opened FMQs by asking about the state of the NHS in Scotland, focusing on Glasgow's Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. He said the flagship hospital had seen more than 1,000 people wait longer than 4 hours for treatment in a single week. Ross went on, all over Scotland, the number of people waiting beyond the target time was over 9,500. It is the worst ever performance in Scotland's A&E departments. So what specific actions is the First Minister taking to prevent people waiting hours on end at accident and emergency departments over Christmas? Responding, Sturgeon said that for the QEUH specifically, there was a range of actions underway, including opening additional wards on site, reconfiguring the surgical and medical capacity balance. They are also working to improve performance in the minor injuries flow, and they are optimising their discharge process. The Tory MSP said he had been asking for a more general Scotland-wide response, not a focus on the QEUH. He said, in the most recent month of data, 1,900 beds every single day were taken up in Scotland's hospitals by people who had medically been cleared to leave. Ross said the SNP should have kept its promise to end delayed discharge, which would free up 1,900 beds. In a lengthy answer, Sturgeon said that 97% of all patients are discharged without delay, but added that significant steps were being taken to try to push that number up still higher, including targeted investment and increasing pay for social care workers. As the SNP leader listed the steps being taken, Presiding Officer Alison Johnston interjected, "Briefly, First Minister." Sturgeon responded, "I will be as brief as possible. This is important stuff, Presiding Officer. Serious questions have been asked and I'm seeking to give detailed answers." Among murmurs from the Tory benches, she went on, "I would have thought, having raised these serious issues, the Conservatives would actually want the information that answers the questions." In response, Ross said he thought the concerns from these benches were the First Minister's apparently disrespecting the presiding officer. Sturgeon could be seen to shake her head as the Tory leader went on. Perhaps the First Minister would have more time to focus on the issues about the questions on Scotland's NHS if she didn't try to throw the blame elsewhere in the United Kingdom. He claimed there was a unique issue in Scotland where health has devolved to the Scottish Government. Sturgeon rejected the assertion, saying the challenges are not unique to Scotland, they're not even unique to the United Kingdom right now. She went on, if Douglas Ross wants to say this is all specifically about the SNP government, then okay, notwithstanding the challenges our NHS is facing, A&E units in Scotland are the best performing anywhere in the UK. Delayed discharges, while far too high, are lower than they are in England and Wales and on GPs. There are more headcount GPs per 100,000 population in Scotland than the rest of the UK by some considerable distance. That article was by Xander Elliards. This is from The National on Thursday the 8th of December 2022. This is from the news section. Ian Blackford, I could have seen off SNP group leadership challenge. This is by Xander Elliards. Ian Blackford has claimed he would have won the race to lead the SNP group at Westminster if he'd put himself forward. The SNP MP announced he would be stepping down as group leader ahead of the party's annual general meeting. He likely would have faced a leadership challenge at that meeting, with the National being told he jumped before he was pushed. Instead, the choice was between Stephen Flynn and Alison Thewlis, with Flynn winning and a vote of MPs. However, speaking to Jerry McKell on Talk TV on Wednesday evening, Blackford claimed, I could have seen this off. I believe I would have won if I'd put myself forward. Instead, though, the SNP MP said he had asked the First Minister to give him a job convincing business of the merits of Scottish independence, something she has done. Blackford told Jerry McKell's show, look, politics is a dirty business, isn't it? We all know that. You're never going to please all the people all of the time. Some people have a different way of wanting to do things, and I think it's fair to say that some people probably wanted to see the end of my backside off the front bench. That's fine. They're entitled to that. I discussed things with the First Minister and I said, look, give me a job because we need to convince people in the business community that we have a plan for an independent Scotland. I'm really relishing doing that. I've started, by the way, I've had 2 meetings today actually. Being unleashed, I can do things that maybe I've not always been able to do. He added, at the end of the day, I've moved on. There's an opportunity there and Stephen's taken that. He has all my best wishes. The start of Flynn's tenure as SNP group leader has been rocky, with 2 senior MPs publicly resigning from his front bench. On Thursday morning, Pete Wishart quit as DEFRA spokesperson, followed in the afternoon by Stuart MacDonald, who left his role on defence. The article was by Xander Elliards. This is from The National on Thursday the 8th of December 2022. This is from the news section. School closures amid first snowfall of the year in Scotland. This is by Emma Lawson. Scotland's first snowfall of the year has caused disruption with many school closures and delayed opening times. A number of schools in Aberdeenshire were closed or had their start times delayed because of the wintry weather, with Highland Council confirming some closures and delayed starts there too. The Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning over parts of Scotland, with some areas likely to face disruption. The Met Office confirmed there had been 5 centimetres of snow in Aboyne, Aberdeenshire, and at Alfnahara in the Highlands, along with 3 centimetres at Dice near Aberdeen. Met Office Chief Meteorologist Steve Willington warned there is an increasing risk of snow as the week progresses. Willington said, as an Arctic maritime air mass settles across the UK, temperatures will fall with widespread overnight frost, severe in places, and daytime temperatures only a few degrees above freezing. However, the cold air from the Arctic will also bring brighter conditions, with some dry, sunny spells, particularly away from the coast, and where winds are light, it could feel pleasant in the sunshine. Some patchy freezing fog is also likely. He added that yellow weather warnings had been issued for ice and snow for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and parts of England. Willington continued, showers will turn more wintry with an increasing risk of snow as the week progresses, particularly in coastal areas or over higher ground. There will be widespread frost with temperatures falling to as low as -10 degrees Celsius overnight in isolated spots by the end of the week. Roads have also been affected, with Traffic Scotland confirming urging drivers to take care. The article was by Emma Lawson. This is from the National on Thursday the 8th of December 2022. This is from the politics section. Stuart MacDonald resigns from SNP frontbench at Westminster. This is by Laura Pollock. Stuart MacDonald, MP, has resigned from the SNP's frontbench team in Westminster. He has served as the party's Westminster Defence spokesperson for 5.5 years. It comes after Stephen Flynn was chosen as the party's Westminster leader, with Pete Wishart also resigning from the frontbench earlier on Thursday. Revealing his resignation, MacDonald said, "After 5.5 years as the SNP's spokesperson for defence, I have taken the decision to step back from the frontbench team. Being the SNP's defence spokesperson is one of the toughest roles in the party, but one I embrace with enthusiasm and have loved every minute of. I want to thank my friend Ian Blackford for the opportunity to take on the defence brief and for the active support he showed me throughout. Defence and security policy were never particularly easy or urgent for my party. I have sought to change that by going beyond our normal comfort zone, modernising our thinking and normalising discussion about defence. This has been driven by solid teamwork, research and policy development across the huge spectrum that the defence brief covers. I'm proud of the policy work I have done on NATO, a national security strategy, countering disinformation, the armed forces and much more. In doing so, I have aimed to flesh out what a credible security posture for an independent Scotland should look like and hold the UK government to account on where it must improve. None of this would have been possible without an exceptional team of policy research and constituency staff. They work hard, they challenge me, they never complain, they always deliver. I owe each of them a great deal of thanks. As a party of government that aspires to independence, we must always be a confident and mainstream voice on defence and security. I was determined that we would be an active participant in the constantly evolving security debate in Europe, not least after Russia's re-invasion of Ukraine. These issues remain important to me and, although on the backbenches, I will still contribute to the debate. The party today is in a strong position. The latest polling is stunning, even more so when you consider that we are entering our 16th year in government. We are at our best when we collaborate as a united party and sell a modern vision of what Scotland can still achieve. A confident case that's rooted in understanding the challenges of today, offers credible, innovative solutions and builds a coalition of voters behind our ideas. I'm sure the new leadership team at Westminster will keep this at the forefront of their mind and work in that spirit across the party. Independence polling is extremely heartening. Our urgent task is to turn our strong position into a meaningful way forward. This requires sober, considered thought and must engage fellow Scots who may not share our desired outcomes. There are no shortcuts. Getting it right will be a defining moment for our cause. There are many views about how we progress. In the finest traditions of the Scottish National Party, I look forward to actively engaging in what I know will be a robust, respectful and well-informed debate as we approach the special conference next year. I congratulate Stephen and Mary on their election. Both have my full and unequivocal support. MacDonald was voted as the SNP's Parliamentarian of the Year at the party's St Andrew's Day dinner last month, just days after being named as the best Scot at Westminster at the Herald's Scottish Politician of the Year Awards. That article was by Laura Pollock.
From the National, Thursday the 8th of December 2022, from the comment section, Stephen Flynn and Marie Black can reignite her MPs in indie fight. By Leslie Riddick. Fluent, tall, undaunted by the beer pit and without notes or downward looks, Stephen Flynn scored long before he rose to speak at Prime Minister's questions. Why? Compared to every other political leader in the Creaking Commons, he is so very young. Flynn, aged 34, and a 28-year-old Marie Black embody an age group, class background, and nationality too rarely seen or heard in the corridors of power. Of course, the words of the new SNP Westminster leader were also impactful. We'll get there in a minute. But in a world where image matters, and in a chamber dripping with symbolism, the very tilt of this new young defined SNP leadership duo is powerful, instantly redefining a party and cause lazily characterised by unionist detractors as out of touch, over the hill and out of steam. With 56% support for independence, and young folk now championing at the bit in London, the weakness of that dismissive posturing is obvious. Despite the Supreme Court verdict, indeed because of the energy unleashed in the streets of Scotland and Europe, independence is enjoying a resurgence, not beating, not over, not restricted to generations who saw Thatcher use North Sea oil to sell off the family silver, not a crazy preoccupation of the stubborn, ageing few, but something that motivates folk who were in primary school when the Scottish Parliament reconvened in 1999. That's as welcome as it's sudden and relatively unexpected. The shift of Flynn Black doesn't just mean a new top team of straight-talking, focused and combative young Westminster leaders, but also an MP group ready to jump generations, shrug off the polite pecking order that usually determines seniority, and accept leadership from colleagues half their age. Doubtless, some will try to suggest the youth and relative lack of front-bench experience is a weakness for Flynn and Black. Is it heck? Look again at those two sitting in the green benches ready to spring into action. What they convey, what they prove, what they embody is unionism's worst nightmare. New energy, fresh blood, Nightmare in Elm Street Part 73. Another legion ready to pick up the standard and keep arguing the case for independence. And another behind them. And another. Maybe the Tories thought they'd won the constitutional arm wrestling contest once and for all with last month's Supreme Court veto in a Holyrood Red referendum. Not now. Nightmare. Disappointment too for UK Labour, still convinced the Scots' wee obsession with independence will soon be over and the teenage phase will pass, leaving voters free to return to the big two. They were convinced Yesers would abandon the cause, ground down by the stonewalling, deflection and supercilious gameplaying of successive Tory Prime Ministers. It hasn't happened, it isn't going to happen. And nothing symbolises the regenerating capacity of the independence movement more graphically than this Westminster baton change, from one generation of the SNP leader to a new one. And it was pretty seamless. Flynn was poised and confident, a natural performer as befits a man who apparently loves his karaoke. His questions were short, to the point and impactful. True, he didn't skewer Rishi Sunak, but it's hard to know what question could ever floor a PM whose customary answer to Ian Blackford was, always essentially, "You've had your vote," followed by, "Are you still speaking?" Cue contemptuous snorted laughter from the Tory backbenchers. And that's the main challenge facing Stephen Flynn once his front-benching appointments are complete. Small parties only get noticed for rocking the boat, not for playing nice. Apart from Ian Blackford's unplanned walkout in 2018, and the court battles fought by parliamentarians like Joanna Cherry over Brexit, there hasn't been a whole lot of boat rocking by the SNP at Westminster. Indeed, I was surprised to be invited to an online seminar organised by Ian Blackford's office on November the 23rd, Supreme Court Decision Day. I was busy helping to organise rallies that night in Edinburgh and across Scotland, and wondered why the SNP leadership in Westminster weren't kinda busy too. Dissatisfaction over their low-key approach seems to have come to a head in March of this year, when David Linden MP quit as the SNP's Work and Pensions Secretary after defying the party whip over a vote in Social Security, uprating a benefits bill. Linden and fellow Glasgow MP Chris Stevens voted against the bill, while the rest of the SNP group abstained, making Amy Callaghan's gruelling round trip to attend fairly pointless. The Eastern Bartonshire SNP MP has been off work for 2 years after a potentially fatal brain hemorrhage. Just for the record, none of these MPs or their staff has spoken to me, but the episode evidently annoyed others. And, whilst this internal argument drew very little public attention, it was a sign of the deep frustration felt by many SNP MPs, taunted by Yesers and their own constituency activists for appearing to settle down, not settle up in London. Stephen Flynn has a mandate to provide more robust leadership, but that's easier said than done. Partly because strategy must chime with the cautious outlook of party leader Nicola Sturgeon in Edinburgh. Partly because robust speeches, clever interventions and extra parliamentary activity, if that ever returns to fashion, will continue to go relatively unnoticed without a great deal more vigour from the SNP media unit in London. Worse, what seems radical, outspoken and pushy in London may actually look a wee bit wabbit from the perspective of Scotland, where Yes meetings openly talk about recalling MPs or running in a manifesto of not taking seats to the next de facto in the REF general election. No MPs want to replicate the feeble 50, Labour's contingent of Scottish MPs dismissed as invisible, ineffective and totally inactive by the SNP in 1987. But as expectations mount back home, how easily can they raise their game? It's hard to get a meaningful response at PMQs playing the game, no matter how well the question is constructed. So maybe the strategy will be to contrive memorable queries that don't depend on an answer for their impact, like Flynn's opening salvo which asked Rishi Sunak whether his government's greatest achievement was leaving the single market, ending free movement, denying democracy to Scotland, or getting Labour to agree with all of these. Certainly Sunak recovered quickly enough, playing the Tories' well-used furlough and vaccine cards. But the taunts captured within this question were spot on. Likewise, Flynn's mention of 56% backing for a yes in the latest Ipsos Mori poll findings. It was an impressive start. But are words enough? What strategy does the SNP have to upset the apple cart in the weeks and months ahead? Actually, that's not really a question for the SNP's new Westminster leader, but for his Edinburgh boss. And that column was by Leslie Riddoch.
And that was this week's The National podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.